Hello there, I'm Black White News, and I wanted to talk a bit about Trump's moratorium on citizenship. And a lot of people are saying it's discrimination, and it is discrimination, but the, the White House is allowed to do that. They're allowed to discriminate when it comes to immigration. But as normal, I don't want to go on a tangent. I want to read my notes because I've done a lot of research and I've made sure it all sounds okay for publication. So I'm just going to read it and keep myself safe. Okay? So, what does Trump's moratorium on citizenship mean for the affected? The agency responsible, US Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is the USCIS, has issued guidance directing officers to halt all final adjudication on cases from people from 19 specified countries, mainly from commonly Muslim majority countries, Africa, the Middle East, and other previously restricted nations. That includes not just visa or green card cases, but also naturalization applications and the accompanying oath taking or citizenship ceremonies. Even those whose application had been approved but were waiting the ceremony are affected. Their ceremonies are now cancelled, delayed, indefinitely. In short, if you're from one of those 19 countries and you were about to complete the final step to become a US citizen, i.e., the ceremony, that has been suspended indefinitely. The memo says no final decisions, approvals, or denials, and no oath ceremonies should proceed until further notice. According to the memo, the pause stays in effect until the director of USCIS lifts it. There's no end date. This is part of a broader pattern of immigration restrictions under the justification of security and screening. People who would otherwise be eligible to naturalise may now have to wait indefinitely, even if they have met all the legal requirements. In a nutshell, applications or pending cases may remain filed, but the final step, granting citizenship and holding the oath ceremony, has been put on hold indefinitely. It also means that if someone has already submitted and paid, for example, the US $710, which in UK, in sterling, it's £530 to £540, or the US $760, which the UK equivalent is £570 to £575, but their final citizenship ceremony is delayed or cancelled, they could effectively be out of pocket for that amount. That is because the fee is treated as payment for processing, not a guaranteed citizenship issuance. If ceremonies are paused, then people can apply, people can interview, or can be interviewed, people can even be approved, but they cannot become citizens because the oath is frozen. It looks like by tying this restriction to countries rather than individuals, Trump's policy implicitly blames individuals for the nationality they were born into, suggesting that people from these countries are inherently risky or less desirable. In other words, stereotyping. I would have thought that this was discrimination. It feels like discrimination, and that's because it is discrimination, but discrimination that the law currently permits the government to use for immigration control. So legally, courts say immigration classifications are allowed, naturalization is discretionary. Equal protection doesn't apply the same way to immigration decisions, so the court does not treat it like discrimination in employment or housing. If an employer or private organisation in the US treated people differently because of their nationality, that would be legal discrimination. But the US federal government is allowed to do some things that individuals and companies legally cannot do because the US courts give the federal government special constitutional powers over borders, immigration, national security, and this is called the plenary power doctrine. For over 100 years, US courts have held that Congress and the President have nearly unlimited power over immigration, even when decisions would be unconstitutional in any other context. And courts are not equipped to question national security judgments made by the President or Congress. Besides, a bit like the UK, where obtaining citizenship is a privilege, not a right, the same applies in America. Applicants do not have a legal entitlement to citizenship, even after approval. So while this raises questions about fairness, it would appear that any appeals might be unsuccessful because of the plenary power doctrine. Blocking ceremonies sends a clear signal of exclusion. The US Citizenship and Immigration Services has issued a memo freezing all immigration benefit applications, including green card, asylum and naturalization, from people from 19 countries previously targeted by the travel ban. That includes suspending citizenship ceremonies, the oath step, for applicants from those countries, even if they've already met eligibility requirements. I need to reinforce that. The freeze also extends to pending asylum decisions and visa processes for nationals of those countries. In other words, having qualified under existing law is no longer enough. The administration is using a national security justification to halt all applications tied to certain countries, regardless of individual merit or prior vetting. It's a structural freeze, not a case-by-case denial. The government is signalling that citizenship can be withheld arbitrarily based on origin, not just on meeting the rules. The policy doesn't target people based on behaviour, but on their country of birth or citizenship. Everyone from those countries is treated as a potential threat, irrespective of individual record. This decision is likely to discourage immigration from those countries, reduce naturalizations, and limit future immigration, which is what Trump actually wants, is a part of the broader clampdown. So thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of people will now be unable to complete naturalization, get citizenship, or move to full status indefinitely. So it's going to affect their jobs. It's going to affect so much of their lives. The idea that citizenship, the form of recognition of belonging, can be withheld solely because of a nationality undermines the principle of fairness and equal treatment, which may foster resentment. Critics argue that this is scapegoating entire nationalities and creates an administrative limbo for lawful immigrants. Supporters frame it as a security measure to ensure proper vetting before granting citizenship, but it's not. It's not a security measure, because what they're saying is they're not even vetting them. They're just saying they're not going to do it anymore. They're not going to give them citizenship. So how can that be a security measure? Anyway, citizenship is no longer a legal milestone that people earn, but a privilege granted or withheld based on political judgment. For many immigrants, especially those from the affected countries, it means lawfulness and qualifications don't guarantee acceptance or belonging. Citizenship has become conditional on their origin. And that is the crux of that. That is how it is. And you wouldn't believe it is allowed, but it is. You know, I'm sure there'll be people trying to take legal action, but it'd probably be a waste of time and a waste of money, to be honest, because of the plenary protection for the United States and the government. So I think you just have to say goodbye to your $700 or whatever it is, and I don't know what people are going to do. It's just going to affect their whole lives. It's going to make them illegal. Is it going to make them illegal? I don't know. I'm going to have to ask that question, because if they're not giving citizenship, will they be able to extend their current status a bit like the UK? Or are they just going to be, well, I guess in limbo? Anyway, I've got to find that out. See you